Welcome to Mystery Con. Tonight, we'll unfold stories about famous alien abduction. You'll hear these tales with the sound of rain to help you relax and fall asleep. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share this with your friends. Now, sit back, get comfortable, and let's begin. The desert stretched flat in every direction, scrub and dust under a wide evening sky. The air was heavy, still holding the heat of the day. Inside the small radar hut near Roswell Army Airfield, the machines hummed and clicked, filling the silence with their steady rhythm. Staff Sergeant Thomas Hale sat slouched in his chair, smoke curling from a cigarette between two fingers. The glow lit the lines under his eyes. He had done this shift 100 times, listening for blips that rarely meant anything. He tapped the ash into a tray and leaned closer to the radar screen. A faint pulse moved across it, fast and erratic. His brow furrowed. He waited for it to settle, but the signal shot forward, stuttered, and then vanished. "Equipment's acting up again," he muttered, voice low in the empty room. He adjusted the dials, waiting for the familiar patterns to return. In his headset, a thin hiss of static bled in. It wasn't the normal kind. This was sharper, almost like a whisper buried in gravel. He took the headset off and rubbed at his ear. Pressure built there, a dull pop that made him wince. He stepped outside for air. The desert greeted him with quiet. Not the usual summer night noise, but real silence. No crickets, no coyotes. The only sound was the faint rustle of wind through dry grass. His cigarette burned to the filter as he stood, listening. Then he saw it. A streak of light cut across the sky, bright but soundless. It didn't move like a plane or fall like a meteor. It flickered once, then disappeared behind the dark horizon. Hale held his breath. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp like the bite of ozone after a storm. Yet the sky above was clear, stars spread wide. He stayed frozen in place, ears ringing in the stillness. Something wasn't right. The next day carried a weight that no one could explain. Word spread quickly across the base and into town. A rancher had found something out in the desert, wreckage scattered across his land. Hale heard it in bits, men speaking in low voices, cutting off when officers walked past. They said the material was strange, not like anything they had seen. Thin sheets that crumpled like paper but sprang back without a crease. He kept quiet, listening from the side. He thought of the flash in the sky the night before, the silence that followed. His chest tightened when he realized it matched the timing. By late afternoon, orders came down. A small group of soldiers, Hale among them, rode out in a truck, dust kicking behind the tires as the desert swallowed them. The ranch stretched flat and endless. The smell of dry sage carried on the wind. Mac Brazel, the rancher, waited near the debris field. His hat was pulled low, eyes squinting in the glare. He said little, just pointed to the wreckage with a stiff hand. The ground glittered with shards of silver-like foil, spread wide as if scattered by the wind. Hale crouched, picking one up. It was light, almost weightless. He tried folding it, pressing hard between his fingers. The moment he released it, the material snapped back into perfect shape. "What the hell is this stuff?" he whispered. No one answered. They just kept picking up pieces, dropping them into canvas sacks. The air pressed heavy around them, thick with the same metallic tang from the night before. Hale rubbed his ears, waiting for the pressure to clear. It didn't. A corporal cursed under his breath when a radio sputtered with bursts of static. Hale glanced over. The man smacked the side of the set, shook his head. Nothing but noise. Then the desert fell quiet again. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The silence pressed against Hale's skull, louder than sound. That night, back at the base, the whispers grew louder. Some men said they had seen more than wreckage. Something else, covered with tarps and moved quickly away under guard. Hale tried to shake the thought, but it lingered. He thought of the way the officers avoided questions, the way Brazel's hands trembled even as he stood still. Orders came again. Move the wreckage. Secure it. Say nothing. As he carried sacks into the truck, Hale felt the strange foil shift against his gloves. Too light, too strong. Not right. His mind wrestled with it. If it wasn't a balloon, then what was it? He looked at the other men. Their eyes stayed down, their mouths set tight. No one wanted to speak. That night, in the barracks, a soldier broke the silence. "You saw it, didn't you?" Hale didn't answer. The man leaned closer. It wasn't from here. Hale's jaw tightened. He rolled over, pulling the blanket higher. But the words followed him. Not from here. The convoy moved under the cover of night, headlights cutting narrow beams across the dirt road. Trucks loaded with sacks of wreckage rolled slowly, soldiers sitting stiff in the back. The desert around them felt endless, no sound but the grind of tires and the hum of engines. Hale sat near the tailgate, gloved hands resting on his knees. He thought of the piece he had hidden in his boot, folded flat against his ankle. Too small to be noticed, too strange to be forgotten. His leg ached with the pressure of it, but he refused to let it go. At the hangar, the wreckage was carried inside under armed watch. Hale walked beside another soldier, both silent. The material gleamed faintly under the overhead lights, silver against canvas. He kept glancing at the larger crates moved separately, sealed and guarded tighter. As he passed, he caught a glimpse. A tarp slipped for only a second. His breath caught. Something small lay beneath, pale and rigid, a shape too close to human, but not quite. The tarp was pulled back into place before he could look longer. He forced his eyes forward, steps heavy. His stomach turned cold. Later, Colonel Blanchard's words echoed through the base. A flying disc recovered. Men traded looks, whispering behind closed doors. The story spread fast, carried into town, printed in black ink the next morning. Hale held the paper in his hands, heart pounding. By evening, the headline changed. Just a weather balloon. The shift was sharp, final. Officers spoke in clipped tones, dismissing questions. Hale heard the new orders. Say nothing. Report nothing. Forget. But he couldn't. That night he sat alone on the edge of his bunk, boots unlaced. He pulled the small shard from its hiding place, turning it over in the dim light. Thin, silver, unmarked. It bent between his fingers, then sprang back, smooth, as if untouched. He closed his fist around it. His chest felt tight, his breath shallow. He wanted to believe the new story, to let it go, but the image under the tarp burned in his mind. At dawn he stepped outside, the desert stretching wide and empty. The sky was pale, streaked with faint clouds. Birds scattered suddenly from a nearby tree, wings cutting the still air. Then he heard it. A low hum, distant but clear, like the vibration of power lines carried through the ground. He lifted his head, scanning the horizon. A flash of light shimmered high above, gone in an instant. No sound. No trail. Nothing left but silence. Hale stood motionless, the shard pressed into his palm, and he knew he would never forget. Years passed, but the memory stayed with him like a scar that never faded. Hale carried it in silence, the shard hidden deep in a small tin at the back of his trunk. He never showed it, never spoke of it, but on restless nights he would take it out, holding it in his palm as if it might whisper answers. He lived a long life, moving from base to base, then into quiet retirement. Yet the silence of that night in the desert always returned. The air pressure, the static in his ears, the smell of scorched metal, it all came back whenever the wind died down and the world seemed to pause. He often wondered why it was him who had to see, why he had to know. He wanted to believe the official story, to pretend it was nothing more than a balloon, but he couldn't unsee the flash in the sky, the strange material, the blimps under the tarp. In his later years, he found himself thinking less about fear and more about wonder. Maybe it was not a threat at all. Maybe it was a reminder, a sign that people were not alone under the stars. He would sit outside at dusk, watching the horizon, waiting for another flicker of light. The shard always felt cold in his hand, even on the hottest days. A piece of something that should not exist, yet did. He never told his children, never told his friends. Some truths, he decided, were carried quietly. The desert had taken the sound that night, had swallowed it whole, but it had left him with something else. A burden, yes, but also a gift. Proof that mystery still lingered above, just beyond reach. When he closed his eyes, the silence came back first. Then the hum. Then the flash. And he knew the truth was never gone. It lived on in him, in that small piece of silver he could never let go. It was late September, the kind of night when the roads felt endless and the woods pressed in from both sides. The highway bent and stretched, dark trees standing close, the air sharp and cool. A car moved steady through it, headlights cutting narrow beams across the asphalt. Inside sat a couple, quiet, their bags in the back seat. They only wanted to get home. The man's hands were firm on the wheel, eyes narrowing against the road ahead. He had been driving for hours, shoulders tight, fatigue pulling at him. Beside him, she leaned against the window, watching shapes slip by in the night. The trip had been long, and their thoughts now were simple: bed, warmth, routine. The radio hissed with static, breaking into faint bursts of distant voices, then fading again. He reached to adjust the dial, found nothing, let it go. A soft sigh filled the silence. Outside, the forest gave no sound. No insects, no owls, nothing. It felt wrong, though neither said it out loud. Her ears popped as the car climbed a gradual rise, and she pressed a hand against the side of her head. He noticed, but kept driving. The hum of the engine seemed louder here, the air inside the car thicker. A faint metallic tang brushed the back of their throats. She shifted in her seat, looking out ahead. "What's that?" He followed her gaze. A light sat low in the distance, steady, brighter than any star. He frowned, keeping his eyes on it as the road curved. "Probably a plane," he said, quick, almost dismissive. But the light stayed there, and it was getting closer. The light held its place as the car rolled on, too steady for a plane, too low for a star. He glanced at her again, saw her shoulders stiff, her eyes locked forward. His own grip on the wheel tightened. The road bent right, then left, but the light followed, almost like it was waiting. It moved in sharp bursts, sliding sideways, then stopping dead. His breath caught each time it shifted. "That's not a plane," she whispered. He didn't answer. Saying it out loud would make it real. The engine strained on the incline, louder now, a vibration running up through the seats. He pressed harder on the gas, but the car felt sluggish, heavier than before. Static cracked through the radio again, this time sharper, almost painful. He twisted the knob off, the silence that followed even worse. Her hand pressed against the dashboard, like she needed something solid to hold on to. Ahead, the light dropped lower, a pale oval against the treetops. His chest felt tight. He tried to tell himself it was nothing, some trick of distance or weather, but the words fell apart in his head. She leaned close to the glass. "It's coming closer." The air shifted, a faint buzz crawling against their skin. His ears popped hard, and he swallowed to clear it. A metallic tang filled the car again, sharper now. On the roadside, a dog broke from the brush, froze in the beams, then bolted into the trees without a sound. He muttered low, "We should keep moving." He pressed harder on the pedal. The car did not respond the way it should. The light was directly above them now, pouring white across the hood, across their hands and faces. For the first time, she said it out loud. "They're watching us." The light cut across the windshield, flooding the car in cold white. His knuckles went pale around the wheel. Her breath came sharp and fast, each inhale louder than the engine. The road beneath them blurred, then vanished. It was as if the world fell away. For a heartbeat, maybe two, there was nothing but light and the sound of their own racing hearts. Then, silence. He blinked hard, gripping the wheel. But the car was no longer where it had been. The headlights showed new trees, a bend in the road he didn't remember passing. The dashboard clock glowed the wrong time. Her watch had stopped. His too. Both frozen at the same minute. She rubbed her eyes, her voice unsteady. "What happened?" He shook his head, no words ready. A scraping sound drew his attention down. His shoe was scuffed raw, dust clinging to the edges. She touched her arm, finding a faint red mark, a perfect circle. The air inside the car felt charged, like after a storm. A low buzzing still lingered in their ears. He tried to recall the last few minutes, but his thoughts broke apart, fragments slipping away. Something was missing. Her voice cracked. "I don't remember. I can't remember." He swallowed hard, flashes pressing at the edges of his mind. A cold surface under his back. A figure leaning close. A hand on his wrist, firm but wordless. He looked at her. She was staring into her lap, shaking her head slowly. She was seeing the same fragments. Outside, the forest still held its silence. Not a bird, not cricket. Only the faint shuffle of wind pushing leaves in strange pulses. The compass in the glove box spun without pause. He exhaled, voice low. "We have to keep driving." She nodded once. But the road ahead no longer felt like a way home. It felt like something was leading them on. The car finally pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. The house stood dark and still, porch light left off, windows reflecting only their own headlights. He turned the key, and the engine fell silent. The ringing in his ears did not. They sat there a moment, hands resting limp in their laps. Neither moved to get out. Her watch still showed the same frozen minute, his too, both glowing faintly in the dash light. She opened her door slowly, the creak loud in the night. The air outside felt different, heavy and cold, though the hour should not have been this chilled. They walked to the door without speaking, keys rattling in his hand. Inside, the house smelled normal, lived in, safe. But safety felt thin. She rubbed her arm absent-mindedly, scratching at the faint circle still pressed into her skin. He slipped his shoes off, noticing again the raw scuff across the leather, and set them down carefully. They avoided each other's eyes. The words hung there, but neither dared to give them shape. If spoken, they would never leave. Upstairs, the bed waited. Familiar comfort, yet his body resisted rest. He lay down, eyes wide in the dark, every blink replaying fragments he couldn't fully hold. Her breathing beside him was shallow, restless. The silence from the forest still rang in his memory. The dog bolting, the compass spinning, the beam of light. Each detail replayed, refusing to fade. The river was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that settles in after a long, humid day when the air feels heavy and the insects hum like a dull engine in the background. Two men sat on the west bank, their lines dropped into the dark water. The place was nothing more than an old shipyard, rusted beams and broken boards, but it gave them peace. Charles leaned back on the wooden plank, arms crossed. He liked these nights when nothing was expected of him. He wanted only calm, to sit with the sound of water and let the worries of work slide off. Beside him, Calvin shifted in his seat, restless. Young, shoulders still carrying that tension of someone who hasn't yet learned how to let go. "You hear that?" Calvin asked. Charles glanced at him. "Hear what?" "My ears feel." "I don't know, pressure." Charles shrugged. "Probably the air." He tried to make it sound like nothing, but now that he thought about it, his own head had been buzzing faintly, like a low hum tucked just out of reach. He pressed the side of his face with his palm, trying to ease it. The river lapped slow against the bank. Crickets droned, then fell silent all at once. The kind of silence that makes a man realize how loud life usually is. Calvin sat up straighter, his pole trembling in his hand. "That's not right," he muttered. Charles looked out across the dark water. He wanted to tell him to calm down, but then he saw it too. A shimmer, faint at first, like headlights bouncing off the river. But no road lay that way. The trees behind it glowed soft blue, pulsing. "What is that?" Calvin whispered. Charles swallowed, throat dry. "Don't know." The sound came then, a whirring, low but sharp, like a swarm of bees under metal. It pressed against their skulls, deep enough to feel in their teeth. Charles clenched his jaw and gripped the wooden plank beneath him. The light spread wider, cutting across the river like a sheet. The smell hit next, hot, metallic, like wires burning behind a wall. Calvin covered his nose, gagging. Maybe it's a plane," Calvin offered, voice thin. "No plane sounds like that," Charles said. They both stood now, poles forgotten at their feet. The shape came clearer, sliding above the tree line. Oval, smooth, no seams, no wings. It hovered like it belonged there, weightless yet solid. The water beneath rippled as though being pulled upward toward it. Charles wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He looked at Calvin, saw the same frozen stance, eyes wide and locked on the light. The hum grew louder. Pressure clamped down on their bodies, chest to knees. Breathing felt thick, each inhale forced. Charles tried to lift his arm, but it hung useless at his side. Then they saw them. 3 shapes moving out from the glow. Tall, but not tall, like men. Skin pale, wrinkled, like something soaked too long in water. Their heads rounded, faces flat, eyes dark pits without lids. Arms bent strangely, ending in pincers that opened and closed with soft clicks. Calvin let out a broken sound, somewhere between a cry and a groan. Charles's thoughts blurred. His body wasn't his. His chest burned, as if held tight by invisible straps. The figures glided closer, no footsteps, no sound but the clicking. One stopped before him, head tilting, studying. The pincers reached out, brushed his arm, cold and heavy. Everything spun. The world around him stretched, pulled away, then collapsed into blinding white. He wasn't on the riverbank anymore. The white surrounded him, endless and sharp. No corners, no shadows, just light that seemed to hum against his skin. Charles blinked, but there was nothing to focus on. The ground beneath him felt solid yet soft, as if it shifted slightly with his weight. Calvin floated nearby, his arms stiff at his sides, eyes wide and darting. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. His chest rose in shallow jerks, like each breath was borrowed. Figures moved in the light. The same as before, pale and jointed, sliding with a precision that made no sense. Their pincers flexed, clicking softly, like tools being tested. Charles tried to shout. Nothing left his throat. His mind screamed, but his body ignored him. He felt a pull in his chest, as if invisible hands pressed him flat. His legs didn't belong to him anymore. A lens hovered in front of him. Black center, rim glowing faintly blue. It floated closer, circling his head, pausing at his face. A sharp click echoed, low and steady, vibrating in his jaw. His vision blurred each time it clicked, his eyes twitching without control. The lens dropped lower, scanning his arms, chest, legs. Charles wanted to swat it away. His muscles refused. Calvin twitched beside him, his lips parted in a silent groan. One of the figures pressed a pincer lightly against his shoulder, and he stiffened as though struck by current. Charles felt something in his throat, not physical but pressure, as if a hand were pushing inside from the outside. Cold, metallic, filling him with a taste like blood and steel. He gagged, but no sound left him. The light pulsed brighter. He felt weightless now, lifted though his feet never left the ground. His heart thudded so loud it drowned the hum. He thought it might burst. The lens hovered inches from his chest. Another click, sharper this time, cracked through his bones. His ribs ached as though pried open, though nothing touched him. He clenched his teeth, waiting for something to tear. Then, silence. The lens drifted back. The figures slid away, their pincers folding in. Charles felt the pressure loosen. His arms tingled, his legs quivered under weight again. He blinked once, and he was back. The riverbank stretched around him, dark and damp, the hum gone. His knees buckled, and he fell against the wooden plank with a grunt. Calvin dropped beside him, gagging, spitting into the dirt. His hands shook uncontrollably. The night sounds returned in fragments. A frog croaked somewhere downriver. A cricket clicked twice, then stopped. The air smelled of wet reeds and faint smoke. Charles pressed both hands against his head. His skull still buzzed, his teeth aching from the pressure that had lived inside him moments ago. Calvin coughed hard, wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He stared at the water, chest heaving. What was that? His voice cracked. Charles couldn't answer. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Words had no place for what they'd just left behind. They sat in silence, the river black and endless before them. Charles stared at the river. His reflection rippled in the dark water, broken each time a faint breeze touched the surface. He rubbed his arms hard, trying to feel something familiar. His skin still tingled, as if the cold touch of that pincer lingered. Calvin sat a few feet away, hunched forward, both hands gripping his knees. His shoulders shook. He spat again, muttering under his breath, words too low to catch. His eyes never left the water. "You saw it," Calvin finally said. His voice was flat, like he already knew the answer. Charles looked at him. "Yeah." Calvin let out a rough laugh, short and bitter. "Nobody's going to believe this." Charles thought about that. The sheriff's office. The way people would look at them. He imagined the smirk, the shrug, the whisper behind a hand. But the silence of the woods, the hum still ringing faint in his skull, it was too real to dismiss. "We tell it anyway," Charles said. Calvin turned his head, eyes wide, wet with the kind of fear that sits deep and stays. "I don't want to." Charles didn't answer right away. He listened to the sounds coming back to life. A cricket here, a frog there. But it wasn't the same. The night felt changed, like the ground itself was holding its breath. He pushed himself up, legs stiff, joints sore. The world around him seemed tilted, like everything was 1 degree off. He glanced at the trees, at the black sky above. Ordinary, yet not. Calvin stood slow, his steps uneven. He wiped his face with his sleeve again, breathing heavy through his nose. "Let's just go." Charles nodded. His chest ached, but he followed. Each step felt strange. The dirt softer than it should have been, the air sharper in his lungs. Behind them, the river lapped against the bank, steady, as if nothing had happened. They walked back to the truck without a word. Gravel crunched under their boots, each step too loud in the heavy night. The glow was gone now, but the air still held that faint metallic scent, like something scorched and unfinished. Calvin climbed in first, slamming the door harder than he meant to. His hands gripped the steering wheel, though he didn't start the engine. He just sat there, shoulders stiff, breath shallow. Charles slid into the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. His jaw clenched tight. He wanted to speak, to break the silence, but nothing fit. Finally Calvin whispered, "I can't tell my folks." Charles turned his head. "You have to tell somebody." "They'll think I'm crazy," Calvin said. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the windshield. "They'll laugh." Charles let the words hang. He thought of his own family, of sitting at the kitchen table and trying to explain the blue lights, the figures, the way his body hadn't belonged to him. The image of disbelief pressed against his chest, heavier than the thing had inside that craft. "We know what happened," Charles said at last. "That's enough." Calvin swallowed hard. His knuckles stayed white on the wheel. "But it doesn't feel like it's over." Charles looked out at the river, dark and still. The bank they had just left swallowed by shadow. He felt the same. It wasn't over. Not for either of them. The forest was quiet, colder than usual for early November. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, leaving the pines outlined in fading grey. A truck sat idle on a dirt road, its headlights cutting thin beams through the trees. The men had been working all day, chainsaws biting into thick trunks, the smell of resin clinging to their jackets. They were tired, clothes stiff with dust and sap. Payday was a week away, and talk drifted to wives, girlfriends, the price of gas. Inside the cab, the heater rattled but gave little warmth. One man leaned against the window, rubbing his eyes. Another lit a cigarette, its glow flaring in the dim. They joked quietly, trying to push back the weight of another long day. The youngest among them, restless and quiet, stared out at the dark forest. The job paid the bills, but the routine gnawed at him. Each day felt the same, the silence pressing in as soon as the saws stopped. He watched the tree line, mind wandering, half expecting something to break the monotony. For a moment, he thought he saw it. A faint shimmer between the trees, like mist catching stray light. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. The shimmer was gone. The truck jolted as it rolled forward again, headlights bouncing on ruts. The men fell silent, listening to the steady hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on dirt. Outside, the forest was still, too still. A heaviness pressed in, subtle but strange. Ears felt tight, like climbing fast in a plane. The men shifted uncomfortably, clearing their throats, shrugging it off as fatigue. But the quiet deepened, the kind that made even the night insects fall silent. And then, from deeper in the woods, a pale glow began to pulse. The glow pulsed through the trees, faint at first, then steady. It looked like a campfire at a distance, but too white, too clean. The truck slowed. No one spoke. One of the men leaned forward, hand gripping the dash. "What the hell is that?" The driver cut the engine. Silence dropped harder. The men shifted in their seats, breathing louder than they meant to. The glow flickered again, a soft hum sliding under it, like live wires in the air. The youngest opened the door. Gravel crunched under his boots as he stepped out. "Don't," someone muttered. He ignored it, eyes fixed between the trees. His chest felt tight, like the air was thinner here. The others stayed by the truck, voices low, nervous. "It's moving," one said. "No, it's just light." "Light doesn't move like that." The glow thickened as he walked closer. Branches bent with the wash of pale colour, shadows twitching on the ground. He smelled it now, a metallic tang, sharp and sour. His skin prickled, hair on his arms standing up. Behind him the crew called again, louder. "Get back here. Come on, man, leave it." He didn't turn. Something in him pushed forward. Each step made the hum stronger, rattling in his ears. The forest felt hollow, emptied out. No birds, no wind, just the light, steady and alive. Then it came into view. Hovering above the clearing, no taller than the trees, was a shape, round, edges blurred by its own glow. It rotated slowly, like it was testing the air. He froze. His mouth went dry. Thoughts ran jagged, half words. "It's real. It's here." The men shouted again, voices breaking. The youngest didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest was locked, feet nailed to the ground. The object tilted slightly, and the hum grew louder, pressing inside his skull. Then the beam hit. A column of white light snapped down, solid as stone. He felt it before he saw it, pressure slamming into his chest, ears popping sharp. The world tilted sideways, air knocked out of him. The men screamed. Truck doors slammed. Tires spun dirt. He tried to breathe, but the beam held him, skin buzzing, vision flashing white. For a heartbeat he saw nothing but light. Then he was gone. Weightlessness pressed against him, not floating but suspended, like the air itself had thickened. His body wouldn't answer him. Hands felt heavy, eyes locked open. A sound pulsed all around, not loud but constant, like bees humming against glass. His vision blurred, shapes flickering in and out. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry, the taste of metal filling his mouth. Something moved at the edge of sight. Tall, narrow outlines sliding across the light. They didn't speak, didn't pause. Just precise movements, measured and silent. He thought of running, but his legs weren't his. He thought of yelling, but his voice was gone. A cold surface touched his back. He realized he was lying down, though he couldn't remember falling. Overhead, a ceiling shimmered faintly, glowing at its seams. Then one shape leaned closer. Not human. Its head too large, its eyes dark, no reflection in them. The air thickened again, pressing into his ears, making them pop sharp. He blinked hard, wishing it away. The figure stayed. Its presence was steady, calm. A hand, thin and pale, pressed against his chest. The pressure wasn't crushing, but final, like being pinned without force. His heart stumbled. Thoughts scattered. Why me? What are they? Light flooded his vision again. Pinpricks of brightness danced like needles across his skin. His body tingled, muscles twitching as if charged with static. Time stretched, each second drawn long. He couldn't tell if hours passed or minutes. Just the hum, the touch, the endless light. Somewhere else, miles away, the men argued by the road. Fear pulled them in opposite directions. One said, "Go back." Another said, "Leave him." No one moved. In that silence he drifted, half here, half somewhere else. Memory cracked, pieces sliding out of reach. But one stayed sharp. The hand on his chest, cold, steady, unyielding. He closed his eyes. The hum deepened. The world fell away. They found him near a roadside 5 days later. Curled against the ditch, clothes stiff with dirt, lips cracked. He was lighter, face hollow, eyes sunk deep. When he stirred, his voice was broken, barely more than a whisper. No one understood what he said. They carried him into town, the weight of him thinner than they remembered. Locals gathered, whispers chasing every step. Some swore it was a stunt. Others crossed themselves, avoiding his gaze. The sheriff asked questions, sharp and steady, but his tone carried doubt. What happened out there? He shook his head, eyes drifting to the floor. I don't know, I don't. The crew stood behind him, pale and silent. Their story never wavered. Light in the trees. A beam. Him gone. Then nothing but silence. Polygraphs were done. Men hooked up to wires, needles scratching paper. The results came back clean enough to unsettle the doubters. Still, the questions didn't stop. Reporters circled. Churchgoers muttered. Children stared at him like he was a ghost. He walked through it all, body there, but mind somewhere else. At night, in the small house where he stayed, he sat by the window. Forest black beyond the glass, a hum faint in memory. He tilted his head, listening, waiting for it to come back. Restless before, he now carried a distance, an edge no one could reach. Conversations thinned around him. Smiles faltered. The lake was quiet that night in northern Maine. The fire cracked and popped on the shore, a steady glow against the black tree line. The canoe sat half in the water, tied to a branch, its surface reflecting the small orange light of the flames. 4 men sat close to the fire, boots drying, shirts still damp from the day's work. They were young, in their 20s, still carrying the restless energy of students. Jack poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks climb and vanish. His twin, Jim, lay back on a log, sketchbook open but untouched. Charlie, broad-shouldered and steady, had stripped branches for fishing poles. Chuck leaned back, hands behind his head, staring at the stars. The wilderness was supposed to be an escape. Long paddles through winding rivers, nights under endless sky, mornings with only the sound of loons. No classes, no deadlines, no traffic. Just quiet. That was what they wanted. But the sky felt different tonight. The stars seemed sharper, almost electric. When Jim lowered his sketchbook, his eyes lingered. A few of them pulsed faintly, like a static flicker in the air. He squinted, rubbed his eyes, but it stayed. He thought of saying something, then let it go. The fire threw the smell of resin and pine, mixing with the damp earth. The men were tired, the kind of tired that made silence easy. Somewhere far off, a loon cried across the water, then quiet again. The night held still. None of them said it aloud, but each felt it. A pressure, faint at first, building just enough to notice. Like the air was too thick, pressing faintly at the ears. Jim sat up, listening. His eyes returned to the stars. One of them looked closer now, brighter, and it did not blink. The fire burned steady, throwing long shadows on the sand. The 4 men loaded gear into the canoe, rods and lanterns, ready for a night of fishing. The lake stretched out black and calm, rimmed with pine. Charlie pushed them off with one hard shove, the canoe gliding forward with barely a ripple. The oars dipped, slow and even. The only sound was water against the hull. Jim turned in his seat, watching the fire behind them. It glowed bright, a marker against the dark. He felt safer with it burning, like a line back to shore. Then he noticed it again. The star that didn't blink. It hung above the trees, brighter than the rest. Too steady. Too sharp. See that? Jim whispered. Jack glanced up, frowning. Not a star. Chuck leaned forward, squinting. Plane, maybe? Charlie shook his head. No, too still. They watched in silence. The light pulsed once, a slow beat, then again. White, then green, then faint red. It hovered, then slid sideways with a smoothness that didn't fit. Jim lifted the flashlight and clicked it on. He tapped out the letters, 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. The beam cut through the night, a thin challenge. The pulsing light paused. Then it moved closer. The air shifted. The forest behind them fell silent. Not a cricket, not a bird, not a ripple of breeze. The water shimmered under the approaching glow, small waves rippling outward as if pulled toward it. "Turn back," Chuck muttered. His voice was flat, almost too low to hear. No one moved. The light swelled brighter, almost painful now. Jim felt the hairs on his arms rise, a faint buzz crawling over his skin. His ears popped as if pressure dropped, sharp and sudden. The fire on shore caught his eye. It looked smaller, much smaller than it should have been. They had fed it heavy logs before leaving. It should have been a tower of flame. Now it was barely aglow. Time felt wrong. The light shifted again, and a beam spilled across the canoe, bright as noon, swallowing them whole. The oars slipped from their hands. Everything went white. Cold metal pressed against his skin. Jim opened his eyes, but the light was blinding, washing everything in sterile white. He tried to lift his arm, but nothing moved. His chest tightened as if weight pinned him down. He could hear them. The others, close but muffled, like voices under water. A faint groan, a short gasp, then silence. Shapes leaned over him. Heads too large, eyes too dark, skin the color of ash. Their movements were smooth, without pause, without sound. Something sharp touched his forearm. Pressure, not pain, as if a sample was being drawn. He wanted to flinch, but his body would not obey. His thoughts screamed against the stillness. Jack's voice broke through, strained and thin. "Jim?" No answer came back. Just the hum, low and steady, vibrating through the walls, through his bones. A smell lingered in the air, metallic, like copper left in rain. His tongue tasted dry, his throat tight. Another shape appeared beside him, holding something thin, silver, a tool that caught the light. It pressed near his temple. Heat spread through his skull, deep and pulsing. His eyes watered, vision blurring. Panic clawed at him, but the sound in his head grew louder, like static filling every corner. Then, silence. The next blink came with darkness. The hum was gone. The air smelled of smoke and pine again. He sat upright in the canoe, chest heaving. The oars drifted in the water. Charlie clutched his knees, eyes wide. Chuck stared at the shore without speaking. Jack rubbed his wrist, skin marked with a faint red line. The fire they had left behind was nearly gone. Just a few embers glowed in the ash. Jim checked his watch. Hours had passed. None of them spoke. Not right away. The canoe scraped against the sand as it drifted into shore. None of them moved at first. The paddles floated beside the hull, caught in the weeds. The night air felt heavy, colder than before, carrying only the faint crackle of the dying fire. Charlie was the first to stand. His legs shook as he dragged the canoe higher onto the bank. He didn't look back at the others. He just muttered, "We need wood." Jack crouched by the fire, poking at the ash. The logs they had stacked were nearly gone, burned far too quickly. He shook his head, whispering, "This doesn't make sense." Chuck stayed at the water's edge, staring out over the black surface. His lips moved as if forming words, but none came out. His shoulders hunched, arms wrapped tight, like he was bracing against something unseen. Jim rubbed the line on his wrist, raw where it had not been before. His fingers trembled. He glanced at his brother but said nothing. The silence between them felt heavier than words. When Charlie finally fed new branches to the fire, sparks lifted into the air, but the light did nothing to ease the unease pressing around them. No one wanted to sleep. They sat in the glow, eyes darting to the tree line, to the sky. Every flicker made them flinch. "Did it happen?" Jack asked at last. Charlie stared into the flames. "You saw it." No one argued. They stayed awake until dawn. Years later, when asked, each told it differently. Some left pieces out. Some swore nothing happened at all. But they all remembered the silence of the woods, the static in the air, and the hours they could not account for. And they remembered the fire, burned to embers far too soon. That part never changed. The playground stretched out behind the small brick school, dry grass bending under the heat. Beyond the wire fence, the bushland swayed in a faint breeze, its scrub and trees pale under the morning sun. Children scattered across the yard, shouting, chasing, tossing stones into the dust. He stood apart, crouched near the edge of the field. His stick scratched circles into the dirt, quick sketches that would vanish with a kick. He liked the quiet corner, away from the noise. The sound of cicadas filled the air, steady and high, and for a while it was enough. Then the air changed. A pressure pressed against his ears, sudden and strange, like diving too deep underwater. He rubbed the side of his head, but it didn't stop. The cicadas had fallen silent. No bird calls, no laughter, nothing but that dull weight. He looked up. A shimmer floated near the tree line, just above the ground. At first it looked like heat haze, a silver ripple in the sunlight. He blinked. The shape held. A sharp metallic tang cut the back of his throat. A boy nearby stopped mid-run, pointing. "What's that?" Others turned. Voices rose. Some laughed. Others squinted into the light. Feet scuffed as more children drifted toward the fence. The shimmer thickened, edges hardening until a disc-like form hovered, silent, unreal against the sky. He froze, stick still in his hand. His chest tightened. Part of him wanted to shout. Part of him wanted to run. But he couldn't move. The air hummed low, steady, deep enough to feel in his ribs. The children gathered near the fence, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their voices a jumble of guesses and gasps. Some stood on tiptoe, others gripped the wire with white knuckles. The shape held steady above the brush, gleaming like polished metal, yet not solid, not steady. He edged closer, heart pounding, every step slow. The hum grew stronger. His hair prickled as if charged with static. A bitter smell, sharp like burning wires, coated his tongue. "Do you see it?" a girl whispered. "Yeah, it's there." The form shimmered again, stretching, shrinking until it flattened into a disk. Then, without sound, something stepped from it. A figure, tall and narrow, black from head to foot. The air seemed to bend around it. Children gasped. Some turned and bolted toward the buildings. He stayed. His feet wouldn't move. His breath caught in his chest. The figure glided forward, smooth, each motion too precise. It stopped at the edge of the trees, just beyond the wire. The eyes were what held him. Large, dark, pulling him in. He wanted to look away. He couldn't. Words filled his head, though no mouth had opened. Not words exactly, but heavy impressions. Damage, earth, future. The pressure built as if his own thoughts had been crowded out, replaced by theirs. He pressed his hands to his ears. Nothing changed. The voice wasn't outside. It was inside. A boy near him shouted, "It's talking." Another cried, "No, it's just staring." Voices clashed, each child insisting on their own truth. Yet he stood silent, frozen in that gaze, drowning in images too sharp to forget. The figure's gaze locked onto him. Everything else faded. Children shouting, feet pounding the dirt, even the low hum in the air, all dropped away. Only the eyes remained. A pressure closed around him, heavy as water. He couldn't breathe right. His chest rose shallow, ribs tight. His skin tingled as though pins pricked him from every direction. Images struck fast. flames tearing through forests. Rivers are clogged with black sludge, smoke curling from broken machines. None of it distant, all of it as if seen through his own eyes. He whispered without knowing, "No." The figure moved no closer, yet the pressure deepened. The sense grew sharper. This was not just a warning. It was to blame. His legs trembled. He wanted to run, but they held firm. He wanted to scream, but the voice inside left no room. "Stop it!" a girl yelled near him. She covered her face with both hands. Another boy cried, "There's more of them." But he saw only the one, steady, silent, eyes too wide. The disc behind it pulsed once, edges folding inward like paper. The air snapped with static, lifting dust into spirals. Then, nothing. The figure drew back, the shimmer collapsed, the space where it had stood empty in an instant. A rush of wind bent the grass flat, then stilled. He staggered, knees weak. His stick lay broken at his feet, sketch smeared in the dirt. The silence hung heavy, thicker than before. Then voices burst out. They were tall. No, just lights. It had eyes like glass. Teachers ran toward them, faces tight, demanding answers. The children shouted over each other, words colliding, claims contradicting. He said nothing. His mouth was dry. The only thing he carried was the hum still lodged inside his ears, steady as a heartbeat. That night he lay in bed, the thin blanket pulled to his chin. The house was quiet except for the creak of wood in the walls and the faint buzz of insects outside. He pressed his ear into the pillow and listened. The hum was still there, low, steady, like it had followed him home. He turned over, eyes open in the dark. He saw again the trees bending, the silver folding into itself, the eyes that never blinked. He blinked hard, but the image stayed. At school the next day, whispers filled the yard. Some swore they saw tall shapes. Others insisted it was only light. Teachers told them to stop, called it a trick of the sun. He stayed quiet. When asked, he only shrugged. He could not find words. Every time he tried, his throat closed and the images returned sharper than before. In the weeks after, he sketched in his notebook. Circles, eyes, flames, always the same shapes. Pages filled and he tore them out, hiding them deep in his desk. He realized it was not about proving anything, not about convincing the teachers or the parents who shook their heads. It was about the silence that fell that day, the metallic taste, the static in his hair, and those eyes. They had seen him. Late November, Lower Manhattan. The kind of night when the streets should be restless but weren't. From her 12th floor apartment, she sat by the window listening. The city had a hum. It always did. Cars, horns, sirens in the distance. Tonight it was different. Quiet. Too quiet. She rubbed her ears, thinking they were blocked. The pressure didn't ease. It deepened. Like when a plane climbs too fast. She turned off the lamp beside her. The room sank into shadow. The city spread out beyond the glass. She leaned close, waiting for something, anything. No traffic, no voices, no wind. Her mind whispered, maybe the world had stopped. Then, faint and low, a crackle, like static from an old radio, soft but steady. She checked the appliances. Everything was off. The sound wasn't coming from inside. It was in the air. She pulled the curtain wider. Below, the East River looked dull, no sparkle under the streetlights. Her chest tightened. The silence wasn't peace. It was wrong. Something flickered high above the water. Small at first. A pale light, bluish and soft. She blinked hard. It was still there. Floating, she thought. A helicopter, but no blades, no sound. The light shifted, slid sideways, then froze. Her breath caught. She stayed by the window, forehead almost against the glass, heart slowing to a heavy, uneven beat. Across the street, a parked car sat by the curb. Inside, two men watched the same light. They weren't locals killing time. Dark coats, hands still, eyes lifted. Security detail on a night shift. One muttered, "Chopper." The other shook his head. "No. Look at it." Their voices barely left the car. Their eyes stayed on the sky. She pressed her palm flat to the glass. The air inside the apartment felt thicker now, tinged with something sharp, metallic, like wires heated too long. Her ears buzzed harder, in rhythm with the light. She swallowed, but the pressure only grew. The light drifted closer. She whispered to herself, not loud, just words slipping out. "What is that?" The static rose. The air pressed down. Then the traffic hum returned, only it wasn't the city. It was inside her head, and the silence outside stayed unbroken. The light hung above the East River, steady now, no sway like an aircraft. It pulsed, faint then bright, in time with the ringing in her ears. She stepped back from the window, hand gripping the frame. Her chest felt heavy, breath caught short. She wanted to move, but her feet stayed planted. Across the street, the two men left the car. Their doors shut soft, barely a click. They tilted their heads back, necks stiff, eyes wide. One whispered, "Not a chopper." The other pressed his lips tight, shaking his head. She pushed the window open an inch. The metallic smell thickened, sharp like burnt wires. She gagged, covered her mouth, but it lingered deep in her nose. The light shifted again, closer now, no sound at all. She thought, maybe it's a balloon, but balloons don't glow, don't press against the air like this. She whispered, "I should call someone." But her voice cracked, small, useless in the empty room. The air around her felt charged, skin prickling as if static filled the apartment. She rubbed her arms hard, but the sensation stayed. Outside, the men glanced upward, then at her window. Their eyes widened. One grabbed the other's sleeve. Look, she's moving. She felt her legs lighten, knees trembling, the floor soft under her feet. Her heart slammed, yet her body rose, pulled forward, slow, steady. Her hand slapped the glass, but it didn't stop her. The window wasn't open wide enough. She knew it. She braced for the crack, the shatter. It never came. Her body slid through, smooth, silent, as if the glass wasn't there. The night air hit her skin, cold and sharp. Her ears screamed with pressure, like diving deep in an instant. She gasped, but no air filled her chest. Below, the two men stood frozen. One crossed himself. The other's lips moved, a broken whisper. "Oh my God!" She floated higher. Her arms reached out, flailing for something solid. The light swelled above, filling her vision. The static shrieked in her head. Her body stiffened. Then silence. A chamber, circular. Smooth walls, no seams, no corners. She landed softly, though no floor was visible at first. She turned, searching. Her breath came in short bursts. Shadows moved. Thin figures, tall, their steps soundless. Their eyes caught the dim light. Black, endless, reflecting her own shape. Her throat clenched. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. Something pressed into her thoughts, heavy, not words, but meaning. A knowing that wasn't hers. A voice inside her head, but not her own. Her knees weakened. She thought, "They know me. How do they know me?" The figures drew closer, not touching, just watching. Calm, deliberate. The air buzzed faint again, like the static returning but softer now, measured. For a moment her fear slipped. A strange calm took over. She felt small, examined, but not broken. Then a flash. Images that weren't memories but felt like them. Other nights. Other times. Always the same chamber. Always these eyes. Her stomach turned. This wasn't the first time. She had been here before, and she knew she would be here again. She blinked hard. The chamber blurred, then sharpened again. No seams, no doors, only light that seemed to come from nowhere. The figures stayed close, 3 of them unmoving. She could feel them pressing into her mind, not with words, with presence, with recognition. Her hands shook. She whispered to herself, but the sound barely left her lips. Why me? The thought that came back wasn't hers. It carried weight, like memory folded inside her skull. You have been here. Her breath hitched. Her legs buckled, but she didn't fall. The floor held her upright as if gravity shifted to keep her still. She felt the cold. Not on her skin, but in her bones. A deep chill that settled inside. Her eyes darted to the walls, searching for escape. Smooth, endless. Her chest tightened. The ringing in her ears rose again, then broke into silence. One figure leaned closer. Its eyes reflected her face, warped and stretched. She turned away, squeezing her own eyes shut. Flashes came quick. A night years ago. A light above her bed. Shapes bending close. Hands not touching but holding her still. She gasped. No, no. Her palms pressed against her head. She thought, this isn't the first time. It's been happening. Over and over. The static returned, faint, steady. Her fear shifted to something else. Not calm. Not terror. Something between. She opened her eyes. The figures were gone. Only the chamber remained, lit and silent. Her body swayed, then dropped. Not a fall. More like being lowered, careful, placed back. The cold air of her bedroom returned. Sheets damp. Pillow twisted under her cheek. Dawn light seeped pale through the curtain. She lay still, listening. The city outside was alive again. Cars. Horns. The hum of morning. But in her ears, faint, almost hidden, static. She sat up slow, heart beating heavy. She touched her arms, her legs. All there. All hers. She turned to the window. Across the street, a car sat at the curb. Inside, 2 men stared forward, blank, unmoving. One rubbed his face hard. The other leaned back, eyes shut tight. She looked away quick, pulling the curtain closed. Her breath caught in her throat. She thought, they saw it too. She pressed her hands together, knuckles white. She couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. The city roared back to life outside. Buses, horns, voices. Normal again. But she knew. Something had marked her. Something had taken her. And somewhere above the river, the silence still waited. The morning sun spread across the skyline, pale and thin. She sat on the edge of her bed, hair damp with sweat, sheets twisted around her legs. Her fingers dug into the fabric, gripping as if she might fall. The sounds of Manhattan drifted in again. Cars honking, a bus braking hard, voices carrying up from the street. It should have comforted her. It didn't. She moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough. The car across the street was still there. 2 men inside. One leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face hidden in his hands. The other stared straight ahead, unmoving, jaw locked tight. She closed the curtain fast. Her chest tightened. Her thoughts circled. They saw. They know, she whispered. almost mouthing it, "I'm not crazy." The clock on the wall ticked soft, steady, too steady. Her ears still carried the faint static buried under the city noise. A sound no one else seemed to hear. She walked to the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and stared at the mirror. Her eyes looked different. Not red, not tired, just different. She thought, "Something in me has changed." Back in the room, she sat again. She wanted to call someone, to tell the story out loud, but the words felt impossible. Who would believe it? The city outside carried on as if nothing had happened. Normal life moving forward. She looked once more at the curtain. Behind it, the skyline stretched clear under the morning sun. She didn't open it. She stayed still, listening to the faint static inside her head, knowing it hadn't left, knowing it never would. The woods stretched quiet under a thin winter moon. Frost clung to the fence posts along the old track. James pulled his jacket tighter as he walked the line, boots crunching in the frozen mud. It was just another December night. Routine check, nothing unusual. He made notes in the small book he carried, the pencil dull, his handwriting crooked in the dim light. A distant dog barked once, then silence. The kind of silence that pressed in too hard. He paused, head tilted, listening. The air felt thicker, a faint pressure building in his ears, like climbing too fast in an airplane. He rubbed his jaw and kept walking. The forest ahead loomed darker than usual, the branches bare and sharp against the sky. He had work to finish, just a report of poachers. Nothing more. Then he saw it. A faint flash through the trees. Not steady like a flashlight, not quick like a car's headlight. A slow rhythm, almost deliberate. He squinted, turned his head to catch it again. The pulse came back, pale blue, low to the ground. Too far in for hunters, he muttered under his breath. His own voice sounded strange, flat in the still air. He shifted the strap of his bag and moved closer. Each step felt louder than it should, the frozen ground cracking like broken glass. The light pulsed again, steady now, sliding between the trunks. James stopped, breath clouding in front of him. The taste in his mouth had shifted, metallic, sharp, like a coin held on the tongue. He swallowed hard, but it stayed. He told himself it was nothing, training exercise from the base nearby. Maybe a beacon. But deep inside he felt the hairs lift on his neck. The forest was too still. No owls, no rustle. Just him, the frost, and that silent flashing glow. He took another step, then another. He moved deeper into the trees, careful with each step. The glow ahead pulsed in a rhythm that felt almost alive. His breath quickened as the silence pressed harder, the forest holding its air. The hum came next. Low and steady, so deep it trembled in his ribs. He froze, hand resting on a cold branch, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. James whispered to himself, trying to sound steady. Military. Has to be. But he didn't believe it. The sound was wrong. It wasn't an engine. It was more like the ground itself was vibrating. The smell reached him then. Not wood smoke, not damp earth. Something sharp like scorched metal or overheated wires. He pulled his jacket tighter, though the cold wasn't what made him shiver. Through the trunks he caught a shape. Not light now, but a body within it. Angular. Solid. It hovered low, just above the ground, edges blurred by the glow. He crouched, notebook clutched in his hand. His pulse thudded so hard he felt it in his throat. The pencil shook as he tried to scribble a word, but the page stayed blank. Movement. He saw them, quick and pale, slipping against the glow. 3 forms. Too thin, too silent. They moved without sound, like the earth made no mark on them. James's jaw clenched. He fought the urge to run. His chest felt tight, each breath sharp in his lungs. He tried to reason it out. Figures in the light. Could be soldiers. Could be a trick. But nothing about them was human. The glow swelled brighter, a sharp blue-white. A beam swept across the trees, grazing the ground in a smooth arc. The air prickled along his skin, hair rising as if from static. James ducked lower, heart hammering, but the light passed close enough to sting his eyes. His hand slipped, flashlight snapping on with a loud click. The beam cut through the dark, bright and obvious. He froze, staring at the cone of light on the ground, breath locked in his throat. The glow in the trees stopped moving. It knew. The light froze in place, locked on the trees where he crouched. The hum deepened, vibrating in his chest until his teeth ached. James pressed his palms to the cold ground, but the trembling came from inside his bones. The beam turned, slow and deliberate, sweeping back toward him. His ears popped, sharp and painful, like pressure crashing in. He gasped and clutched the side of his head, but the sound didn't stop. Then the air cracked. A sudden burst, like thunder with no sky. He staggered as if the ground had dropped under him. The beam fixed on him. James tried to move, but his legs locked. His muscles strained, frozen tight. The notebook slipped from his hand, pages smearing with frost. His breath came shallow, chest pinned. The blue light wrapped him, solid as ice. His vision blurred at the edges, then sharpened again, too clear. Every branch, every line of bark stood out like cut glass. A metallic buzz filled his skull, not in his ears but behind them. His jaw rattled. His teeth felt loose. The taste of iron thickened on his tongue. Images came. Quick flashes, not from his eyes but inside his head. A wide river under stars he didn't know. A black sky split with streaks of silver. Constellations, sharp and strange, floating in patterns he couldn't name. He wanted to shout, to fight it off, but no sound left his throat. The pressure eased for a moment, just enough to let him draw breath. He wheezed, eyes watering, and whispered into the dark. "Stop, please." No answer. Only the hum, steady and endless. The forms in the light drew closer. He saw them now, more than shadows. Their outlines thin, heads angled, limbs long as saplings. They didn't walk. They simply shifted closer, smooth as drifting smoke. James's heart pounded so hard it hurt. His mind scrambled for reason. Drones. Suits. A trick of the light. Anything. But deep down he knew. They were watching him, measuring him. The hum peaked sharp and cutting. His knees buckled, though the beam held him upright. His whole body shook against the unseen weight. Then, just as sudden as it began, the pressure snapped away. He collapsed into the frozen ground, palms sinking into the mud. His chest heaved. Cold air burned his lungs. He looked up, choking on his breath. The light was rising, pulling through the trees without sound. Upward, smooth, fading into the black sky. No roar. No trail. Gone. The forest stayed still, the silence deeper than before. Only his own ragged breath filled the space. James lay there, trembling, the notebook open beside him. The pencil line scratched across the page, broken, unreadable. He stared at it, hands shaking, and whispered again, "What did I see?" The trees gave no answer. Only the frost settling heavier on the earth. James pushed himself up on weak arms, mud clinging to his palms. His chest burned with every breath, shirt damp against his skin though the night air was bitter cold. He glanced back toward the trees, half expecting the glow to flare again. Nothing moved. He wiped his hands on his jacket, grabbed the notebook, and forced his legs to carry him toward the truck. His steps dragged, knees shaking like he had run for miles. Each sound of his boots on the frozen ground echoed too loud in the still forest. When he reached the truck, he leaned against the door, head lowered, trying to steady himself. He flipped open the notebook with trembling fingers. Only one page had marks, jagged lines, half a word before the pencil had slipped. No record that would make sense to anyone else. At the small station, the heater rattled as he sat at the desk. He stared at the blank report form, pen poised above the first line. His hand hovered there, stiff. What could he write? Lights in the trees, shapes without sound, a beam that held him still. He pressed the pen down, managed a few words. Flashing lights. Hum. Ear pressure. His handwriting wavered, the lines uneven. He stopped. The rest of it hung heavy in his throat, too strange to put on paper. He left the page unfinished, slid it under a stack. Later, driving home, the road empty except for his headlights, he spoke into the quiet cab. I wasn't alone out there. The words sounded fragile, almost broken. He gripped the wheel tighter, eyes fixed on the black stretch of road ahead. But when he blinked, the stars that weren't his still hung in his mind, sharp and unmoving. Constellations from a sky he didn't know. The woods behind him stayed silent, holding the truth he wasn't ready to face. And he knew that silence would never leave him. It was late winter on the edge of Melbourne. The hills of the Dandenongs rolled in shadow, the road cutting through them in long black curves. Fog clung to the low ground, drifting across the headlights. Inside the car, the heater ticked. The wipers squeaked across glass. The smell of damp fabric filled the cabin, faint and sour from weeks of rain. She sat in the passenger seat, arms folded tight. Home was only half an hour away. The kids were asleep back at the house, safe with her sister. She wanted nothing more than to be back under her own roof. Her husband kept one hand on the wheel, tapping his fingers in a restless rhythm. The road was almost empty, only the occasional farmhouse light far in the distance. She shifted in her seat, the seatbelt pressing across her chest. A slight pop in her ears as they dipped into a valley made her wince. The silence struck her first. No frogs, no crickets, not even a dog barking from the farms. She looked out the window, waiting for some sound. Nothing. Strange, she muttered, almost to herself. Her husband glanced over. What? Too quiet, she said, softer this time. He shrugged, eyes back on the road. The tires hummed against the bitumen, steady, the only sound in the night. She leaned her forehead against the glass. Cold air seeped in around the edge of the window. The silence pressed on her, heavy, like the night itself was holding its breath. She told herself not to think too much. Just a drive home. Just another dark road. But the quiet dug in, and the thought kept circling. Something isn't right. The glow came first. A faint shimmer in the distance, low on the horizon, where no lights should have been. She straightened in her seat, eyes narrowing. It was not a farmhouse, not headlights. It was too steady, too round. "Do you see that?" she asked quietly. Her husband squinted through the windshield. Probably a tractor. Someone working late. But it was not moving like machinery. It hovered, pulsing with an orange-yellow light, almost like it was breathing. Her stomach tightened. A prickle ran along her arms, the hairs standing. She rubbed her sleeves, trying to shake it off. The glow grew larger. No sound, no engine. Just the hum of their own tires on the road. "Strange," she whispered. He kept driving, jaw set. The car dipped again, ears popping, and suddenly the air smelled sharp, like something electric. The shape became clearer as they drew closer. Triangular, wide, with lights along the bottom in neat rows. A faint metallic shimmer seemed to ripple across it like heat off bitumen. Her husband slowed. His hand pressed firm on the wheel, though his foot never touched the brake. "What's happening?" she asked. "Don't know," he muttered. His voice was flat, too calm. She turned her head quickly, glancing back. Another set of headlights followed them. A smaller car, 2 women inside. They were slowing too. The triangle hung above the road, silent. The beam of their headlights dimmed against it, like the night had swallowed the light whole. Her chest tightened, pain blooming sharp near her ribs. She pressed a hand to her stomach. Ears ringing now, high and piercing, like pressure squeezing her skull. She tried to speak, but the words caught, thin and dry. Her throat closed up. The car rolled to a crawl. She could not look away. It was there, waiting. The headlights dimmed. The world dropped into shadow, as if someone had pulled a switch. Her breath caught. The car was still rolling, but slower now, like it had lost all strength. For a moment, she thought she had blacked out. Then she felt grass under her shoes. Cold, wet. She looked around quickly. She was standing by the roadside. Her husband beside her, staring upward, his mouth slightly open. The other car was there too, parked at an angle. The 2 women stood near it, frozen, eyes locked on the same spot in the sky. Above them hung the craft, larger now, filling the air, edges sharp against the night. Lights glowed in rows, casting a dull yellow across the ground. A strange silence pressed down. Her ears buzzed with a high whine, as if something inside her head was vibrating. Shapes moved. Dark figures at the base of the craft, tall, too tall, their outlines blurred by the glow. Their eyes, or maybe not eyes at all, but something that reflected the light, like glass catching fire. Her chest seized. A metallic taste filled her mouth, sharp as blood on a bitten tongue. Her husband whispered, barely a word. "What are they?" She could not answer. The figures did not walk. They glided, slow and steady, as if nothing could touch them. The air smelled like scorched wire, bitter and chemical. Her knees weakened. She blinked, and in that blink she was on her back. The grass beneath her. A stabbing pain just above her navel, white-hot, twisting. She tried to scream, but no sound came. The figures leaned closer. She felt them inside her head, rifling through thoughts she never wanted anyone to touch. Her vision blurred. Time folded. And then she was back in the car. The engine roared as if it had never stopped. Her husband was gripping the wheel, his knuckles white. His eyes wide, darting in the mirror. She twisted in her seat. Behind them, the other car jolted forward. She saw the women's faces, pale, mouths open in shock. They had seen it too. Her hand pressed against her stomach. The ache remained, sharp and real. No one spoke. The road stretched ahead, empty, as if nothing had ever been there. But the night still held its breath. Days passed, but the night clung to her. She stood in front of the mirror one morning, lifting her shirt. Just above her navel, a small circle burned red against her skin. Perfectly round. Too precise to be an accident. Her fingers hovered above it, not wanting to touch. A memory flashed, the stabbing pain, the figures leaning close. She dropped her shirt quickly, heart hammering. She told herself it was nothing. An insect bite, a rash. But deep down she knew. Sleep no longer came easy. When she did drift off, the same images returned. A field of dark shapes. A pressure in her skull, like someone tuning a radio inside her head. She avoided the road for weeks, but eventually she had to pass it again. The same stretch of blacktop, the same dip near the creek. The air felt heavy, thicker than anywhere else, as if the land itself remembered. She gripped the door handle, eyes fixed on the roadside. No lights this time. No figures. But the silence was there again. Later, she heard from the other women. They had seen it all too. The lights, the figures, the missing time. Each carried their own fragment of the night, none of them willing to speak it out loud until pressed. That was the worst part. The knowing. It was not just her. The world carried on as if nothing had happened, but she could never look at the sky the same way again. Every night felt heavier now. Every silence is louder. And sometimes, when the wind died and the stars pressed low, she thought she could still feel the high whine in her head, waiting,